Yevamos Daf Kuf Ches is divided in half by a Mishnah. The first half of the Daf continues the Gemara's commentary of our previous Mishnah. We're discussing the different ways that a woman can express her desire to do mian, how she can show that she no longer wants to be with her original husband, and if she's a katana, she is no longer married to him. The Gemara will also discuss what her status is before the mian has been performed, if she is complete marriage status, or because she can walk out, there's a partial marriage status as far as a number of halachos. Then we'll get to the Mishnah, which will take us to what happens if somebody does a mian and gives a get in different orders. First is one and then the other. Does she count as a mima'enes or as a nizgarsha, relevant to a number of halachos that are different for a woman who had gerushin and mian, which the Gemara will explain. So we begin with a brisa, and the brisa gives three examples of a mian. It says, what is a mian? So if she says, Yev she beplani, Bali, I don't want so-and-so, my husband, anymore, I don't want this kiddushin that he gave me to my mother or my brother, that's a classic mian. Even greater than that, says Rabbi Yehuda, even if she's sitting in a litter, she's being carried on a fancy thing where she is being brought from her father's house. Well, her father is not alive, but from the house of her father to her husband's house. And while she's being carried to him, she still says, I don't want my husband anymore. Despite the fact that she's on the way to him, that still counts as a mian. Even greater than that, Rabbi Yehuda says, even if there are guests sitting around the table in her husband's household and she is standing and she's serving them, so she's acting as if she's a very willing wife, still she says, I don't want this, I don't want to be part of this, I don't want him to be my husband, still counts as a mian, even though she's acting in contradictory manners. And even greater than that is even if her husband sends her to the store to buy something, and while she's doing his mission, so she's very much acting like a wife, she's still saying, Yef, she beplani baili, still that is the greatest mian that there is. Now, the Gemara moves on to the next phrase in the Mishnah. The Mishnah had brought the halacha of Reb Chanina ben Antignis, who said that any woman who's too young to wash her ketzef kiddushin, she can't keep track of it. She doesn't even need to do mian, doesn't count as a kiddushin at all. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Shmuel, the halacha is like Reb Chanina ben Antignis, and that's accepted. Now, the Gemara says further, there are other ways that a woman can express a mian without actually saying the words of the mian. So if she gets up and she marries someone else, so Rabbi Yehuda ben Seir says that counts as if she marries someone else, that counts as a mian on her first husband. The fact that she did a marriage to someone else is innately a mian on her first husband, and the second marriage is chal and fulfills the requirement of the mian in the first one all at once. Now, the Gemara says, the way we have Rabbi Yehuda ben Seir phrase is that she went and she did nisuin to someone else. She completed the marriage to someone else. Says Gemara, we have a number of questions over here. What would be if she didn't do nisuin to someone else? She just did kiddushin to someone else. So the Gemara quotes a brisa where we have that Rabbi Yehuda ben Seir says the same thing by kiddushin. He says that if you have a kitana, didn't do a mian, she went and she got kiddushin, Rabbi Yehuda ben Seir said that kiddushin counts as a mian. So the Gemara asks, do the Rabbanan argue on Rabbi Yehuda ben Seir, or does everybody agree to him? If you say they argue, do they argue only by kiddushin, or do they even argue if she went and she got nisuin from someone else? If they argue both kiddushin and nisuin, is the halacha like him? If the halacha is like him, is the halacha like him in nisuin or even in kiddushin? Gemara says, let's try to bring a proof to some of these. Rabbi Yehuda says, name of Shmuel halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Seir. That indicates that there is a machlekes. We don't know what the machlekes was on, if the machlekes was on kiddushin and nisuin, or only on kiddushin, and if the halacha is like that as well. So the Gemara says, let's bring a brisa. So the Gemara quotes the continuation of the story of Avdan, the Talmud of Rebbe, who we saw a few daf earlier. He had his two daughters-in-law do mian on his sons. So the Gemara says that Rebbe, who was Avdan's Rebbe, sent a pair of Talmidei Chachamim to check them and see if they really wanted to do this mian. So they said to the women, see, here come your husbands. And they said, our husbands? Maybe they should be your husbands. Till Rebbe said, that is the greatest mian that there could be. They're clearly saying they don't want this anymore. Now, the fact that they said your husbands, that would seem to indicate that this was from nisuin, not just from kiddushin. And the fact that they therefore went and rebelled, the Gemara says they got nisuin from someone else, that would seem to indicate that it was even from nisuin that they could pull out. Says Gemara, not necessarily. It could be it was just from Kiddushin. Gemara Ezaf halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Seira, even in Nisuin, even if they went and did Nisuin from the first husband. That is, if she had a Nisuin from the first husband, and then when she married somebody else, there it counts as a miyun in that as well. All right, now the Gemara goes on to the next phrase in Mishnah, which we've seen was the halacha of Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar had been discussing what is the relationship between a man and his wife if she is in the situation where she can do miyun, that she's a ketana that was married off by her mother or her brothers. So Rabbi Elazar said that the action of a ketana doesn't count as anything, and it doesn't change her status as far as truma. So if she was a bas yisrael to a kohen, she can't eat truma, and if she was a bas kohen to yisrael, she still could eat truma. So Gemara says that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, I went around to all the chachamim, didn't find anybody who was as clear across the board with the same halach, the same status as Rabbi Elazar says. Rabbi Elazar says she's completely considered to be not any sense is she married to the guy, except for the fact that miyun is required. So she can walk with him, she can go for a stroll with him, she can get it from his lap, and that meaning from his bia, and go do a tevila, and then go eat truma. So if she was a bas kohen married to a yisrael, she can do everything with him as if her husband, get up and go eat truma 10 minutes later, no issue. That's to show that there is absolutely, no matter what she does, as long as it's miyunable, there is still no sense to this marriage here. Now the Gemara quotes a brisa. Rabbi Elazar says the action of a ketana, meaning the marriage of a ketana, is nothing. Her husband gets no rights. He does not get the right to keep her found objects, to keep her earnings, to be made for her nidarim. He doesn't inherit her. He cannot be matami to her if he is a kohen. The rule is she is not his wife in any aspect except that miyun is required. Now Rabbi Yeshua holds the exact opposite. He says he is her husband in all aspects except that miyun can be done. He gets her found objects, he gets her earnings, he can be made for her nidarim, he inherits her, he can be matami to her. General rule, he is his wife, he is her husband, she is his wife in every aspect except that miyun can be done. So the Gemara says, the Rabbi said, I think Rabbi Eliezer makes more sense than Rabbi Yeshua's opinion, because Rabbi Eliezer is across the board. There are no differences. According to Rabbi Yeshua, it's strange. There is a split. The Gemara says, what's the split? The split is that if she's his wife, so then she should require a divorce. How come she could do miyun? So the Gemara says the same split applies in Rabbi Yeshua. If she's not his wife, so then she shouldn't be able to do miyun. She should require a get. So the Gemara leaves it at that. All right, now the Gemara goes to the last phrase in the mission, which was Rabbi ben Yaakov. He said that any situation in which she stays with her husband because of him, that is a confirmation of the marriage. Any situation in which she stays with her husband because of her, that is a rejection of the marriage and it counts as a miyun. So the Gemara says, what is this referring to? So the Gemara means where she has an opportunity to leave and she stays with him. The reason she stays is because she's choosing him, so that's an acceptance of the marriage. If the reason she's staying is because of some other reason, that clearly shows that she wants out of the marriage and that rejects the marriage. And the Gemara will show that the nafka mina sometimes will be whether she's mutter in his relatives or if she's mutter to marry kohanim because she's divorced from him either way. So let's see what the Gemara says. So the Gemara says, what's an example of her staying with him because of him? So the Gemara says that if somebody asks her to marry him, that is some other person besides her husband offers her marriage, and she says, I can't, I'm married to this guy. So that shows that she considers herself married to him, and she's confirming her marriage to him, and therefore that marriage is a good marriage, that's not a miyun in the marriage. If, however, she says to the guy, I can't marry you because I don't think you're a good husband, so then she's showing she doesn't want to be married to her original husband, she just doesn't think that this guy is much of an improvement. That is a rejection of her original marriage, shows that she does not consider it to be anything, and that's a miyun. Now, another example, the Gemara quotes Abai bar Oven and Rav Chanina bar Oven. They both say, if he gives her a get, if the original husband gives her a get, that means she's staying with him because of him. That's not a rejection of the marriage because of miyun. That's showing that this marriage was a good confirmed marriage. and the only reason that it's ending is because there's a get here. That's confirming the validity of the marriage was there before. Now it's over now anyway. What's the difference? The Gemara says the difference is that if the original marriage is confirmed, but it's ended with a divorce, then she's considered to be his grusha. If that's the case, she's also to marry his relatives, and he's also to marry her relatives. She's also considered to be grusha, and she's possible to kohanim. If, however, she does miyun, and there's no get that's given, so that clearly shows that this marriage is canceled. He's mutter to marry her relatives, she's mutter to marry his relatives, and she's not possible from kohanim. So the Gemara says this entire series of halachas you just said is the next Mishnah, which we're about to see. So how could the two sons of Avin here say that this is the explanation of what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said in the previous Mishnah? It's all in the next Mishnah. So the next Mishnah is simply explaining what it said in the previous Mishnah, but that is definitely what it meant. We now begin the next Mishnah, which is indeed the Mishnah we just quoted. The Mishnah begins with the simple halacha: a woman who did miyun on her husband is mutter and his relatives, he's mutter to marry her relatives, and she is not possible from kahuna. However, if she got a get, then she is forbidden to his relatives, he's forbidden to her relatives, and she is possible in kahuna. Now the Mishnah goes on to talk about, what about the halacha of machzer grishasa? We know that it's usher for a woman who was divorced from a man and married to someone else to go back to her original husband. So that halacha plays out as follows. It only is relevant to if she's divorced and not if she had miyun. So if she's married to her first husband, she gets divorced from him, she marries a second husband, and something happens to that marriage, she is divorced or widowed from that husband. The Gemara will later discuss what happens if she does miyun in the second husband. If she's divorced or she's widowed from the second husband, it's also for her to go back to her first husband. If, however, she did miyun from the first husband, then she goes to a second husband, and divorced or widowed from him, she's permitted to go back to her first husband. There's no iser machzer mimma anaso, there's only din of machzer grushaso. Now the Gemara says, what happens if the first husband did both a miyun and a gerushin? What happens if he first was married to her, he divorced her, then he remarried her, and this time she did a miyun, and then she married a second husband, divorced her, widowed from him? Or if she did the reverse, first she did a miyun in her first husband, then she remarried him, then did a gerushin, and then she went to a second husband. Could she go back to her first husband? So the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, that halacha is that whatever was done second is the final. It cancels whatever was done first. So she first did a gerushin, then she came back to him and did a miyun, she's considered a mimma enes. If she goes to another husband, she can come back to him. If, however, she first did a gerushin, she first did a miyun, and then she did the gerushin, the last thing was the gerushin, then if she goes to a different husband, she cannot come back to him. Now this is all if there's only one other person involved. Says the Mishnah, now what happens if there's a second person involved? That is, she does a gerushin, let's say, to her first husband, she marries the second husband, she does a miyun from him, now she marries a third husband, she ends up getting a gerushin or a widowhood from him. Can she go back to her original first husband? What's the question here? She's divorced from her first husband, miyun from her second husband. So is she considered to be a mimma enes or a grusha? So the Gemara here says the second miyun does not undo the first gerushin, and she's also to go back to her first husband. So the Gemara asks right away, it's a contradiction between the beginning of the Gemara and between the first half of the Mishnah and the second half of the Mishnah. First half of the Mishnah said that if she does first a gerushin and then a miyun, it cancels the miyun, cancels the gerushin, she's considered to be a mimma enes, not a grusha. In the second half of the brisa, though, we saw that if she did first a gerushin and then a miyun, it does not cancel, and she is forbidden to go back to her first husband. So the Gemara first quotes the resolution offered by Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. He says, you're right, it's a contradiction. It's two different authors, and they argue. Rava says, what are you talking about? It's not a contradiction. The first case is talking about where the same original husband first did gerushin and then miyun. His miyun cancels his own gerushin and makes her a mimma enes, not a grusha. The seifa, the second half of the Mishnah, is talking about where he did a gerushin, he never did anything else. Since she married a different husband, did a miyun from him. Someone else's miyun does not cancel his gerushin. What kind of sense does that make? So Gemara says, well, why not? Why should be a difference between his gerushin and someone else's, between his miyun canceling his own gerushin and someone else's miyun canceling his own gerushin? Either way, she should be considered to be a mimma enes. So the Gemara explains that the reason that miyun is different here, and the reason for this entire iser is that we're afraid that the woman has a relationship with her original husband, that original husband is going to signal to her that he wants her back. He's going to wink, he'll hint, he'll find ways to communicate to her in a secret way that he wants her back. He'll make up with her privately. He'll therefore win her over again, get her to leave her second husband and go back to her first husband. So, if the original husband had ended off his relationship with her with a get, then that's possible for that to happen because she still loves him. He sent her away, and it could be that he sent her away against her will. If he indicates to her that he changed his mind and he wants her back, she may be willing to do that. So if he ended with a gerushin and then she got a mean from someone else, so now he can make up with her and he'll come back, and therefore we can't allow that. We can't allow her to go back to him after she marries the third husband. However, if he did a gerushin and then he did a miyun, then he had a miyun from her, so now she was memayin in him. The way they ended this relationship was that she said no to him. If she said no to him, she did miyun. He could hint and wink all he wants. She already said that she's rejecting him. She's not going to come back to him, and no amount of hinting or winking is going to help. Therefore, there's no potential that he's going to convince her to come back. We don't have to make an isser of machzir grushaso. You don't have to make that isser. He's not going to draw her away from her current existing husband. Says the Gemara, you're right, you're making a valid point. There is no kasha from the Reisha to the Seifa. So the Gemara says there must have been a different kasha from the Reisha to the Seifa. And that's based on an implication of the Reisha. You can have a contradiction of the case where there is a miyun canceling the gerushin of the first husband. So if you look carefully at the first half of the Mishnah, at the Reisha, the Mishnah seems to indicate that it's only if she got a gerushin from the first husband, and then the second husband did a gerushin or died, that's when she's asked to go back to her first husband. That implies that if the second husband had done a miyun, she's permitted to go back to her first husband. That means that the miyun of the second husband cancels her status as a grusha from the first husband. So miyun of someone else does cancel status as a grusha. But then you go to the Seifa says that if there were three husbands, the miyun of the second husband does not cancel the status of grusha from the first husband. So which is it? Contradiction as to whether the second husband's miyun cancels the status of grusha from the first husband. So on that, we had Rav Yehuda Mishmuel who said it's a contradiction. You cannot put the two together. This time the Gemara quotes Rabbi Elazar who said it's a contradiction. You can't fit them together. Ula said there is a resolution. The resolution is that if a woman has a gerushin 3 times, she counts as a gedola now. She can no longer say that she's a katan and she could do miyan. 3 times makes her a gedola. 3 gerushins makes her a gedola. Therefore, the case in the Seifa where it's referring to that it does not cancel her status, that's referring to where she had 3 gerushins. If she had less than 3 gerushins, it is cancelable. Says the Gemara, according to our first understanding, that there's a machlokas between the Reisha and the Seifa, and it's 2 different Tanaim. One holds that the miyun cancels the status of grusha, a later miyun of someone else cancels the status of grusha, and the other holds that it does not cancel the status of grusha. Who are these 2 Tanaim? Where do you see Tanaim arguing over the concept whether a later miyun cancels the status of grusha or not? So the Gemara says, interestingly, it's a machlokas. What was the psak halacha that we needed to pay money to get during the time when Torah learning was usher and Rabbi Kiva was in jail? So Gemara quotes Brisa, Yehuda in the name of Rav, and here we're referring to Rav as a Tana. Rav says, what is meant by Meimenu b'kesef shasinu atzenu b'mechir yavayu? We had to pay money for our water and for our wood. That's a euphemism. In fact, we needed to pay money to get halacha. So the Gemara says, Rav says the halacha that we were missing, we needed to pay, was this exact question. What happens if a woman is divorced from her original husband and then she marries someone else and does miyun? She counts as now a mima enes, and therefore she can go back to her first husband, or does she count as a grusha and she can't go back to her first husband? So this was a question that they hired someone to go into prison. They paid him 400 zuz to go to visit Rabbi Kiva in jail to try to ask what the halacha is. And Rabbi Kiva says it's aser. And they went to Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira, who was in Nitziv, and they asked him, and he said it's aser as well. So according to Rav, this is what was aser, and Rav is the Tana here that says this is aser. Now Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosi, says this is not what we needed. We did not need to ask this. There's no possibility that this is aser. Simply because her miyun matters the iser eshes ish that she had. Her miyun certainly matters the iser machzir grushasa that she had. If it could matter a kares iser, it could certainly matter a lav iser. So that's not what it was. What we actually had to ask Rabbi Kiva in jail and Rabbi Yehuda in Nitzivin was the question of somebody who has a woman falling to him in Yibam who is a shnios la'arayos. So, for example, you had somebody who had his brother's wife from his father's side was also the wife of his mother's brother, that is, a brother of his mother on the mother's side. So she's a shniya la'arayos, and she's falling to him to yibum. So can she do miyun, undo the status of being a shniya la'arayos, and be able to do yibum? There we had given the psak, because shniya la'arayos is only midrabanan, she needs chalitza and not yibum. Can she matter herself to yibum by doing miyun in the marriage which makes her a shniya la'arayos? Now, if she's a real erva, a rishon la'arayos, we know she can't do that. It's a gzera derabanan. Even if she does miyun, it still has the appearance of being an erva, and we don't allow that. But if she's a shniya, is that allowed or not? That was a question. They hired somebody with 400 zuz to go to Rabbi Kiva and ask him, and he said it's aser, and Rabbi Kiva and Nitzivin also said it's aser. And therefore, this Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yosi is the one who argues and says that the status of miyan is not what was discussed. That's mutter, and that does cancel the status of gerushin. Okay, now the Gemara says, halacha brought by Rav Yitzchak, two different versions of this. Rav Yitzchak bar Ashiyan said that Rav agrees that she's mutter to the brother of her original husband. That's in the case that Rav said is aser. That is, if you had a woman who got gerushin from her husband, then she went to a second husband and did miyan from him. So Rav holds she's not allowed to go back to her first husband because she's considered to be his grusha, not his mima enes. Rav says Rabbi Yitzchak, she can't go back to her original husband's brother, and she's not considered to be eshazach, even though there is an isser to one's brother, to the brother of the husband from which one was divorced. Eshazach survives gerushin. That's only if there was not a miyan. The miyan here does override the gerushin to make her mutter to her original husband's brother, not to her original husband herself. So the Gemara says the question. There's two versions as to what happened here. Either the Gemara asked pshita, or the Gemara said, why should it be? And the svara, either for the pshita or the reason that it should be, is that the whole issa for her to go back to her original husband is that he's going to hint and wink. So hinting and winking is only for her original husband that she has a relationship with, not to his brother. That doesn't make a difference, and therefore you don't have to have that issa existing. So either the Gemara asked pshita, and the Gemara answered, no, we still thought it might be gzera that you'll confuse the two, or the Gemara asked, why should this be true? There's no hinting and winking, and the Gemara answered that it's true because you can still make a gzera.